The Empire had conquered 3,000 worlds. Its fleets had erased civilizations from history. Its soldiers had never been forced to retreat. And then, they found humanity's last ship. One battered cruiser. No fleet behind it. No reinforcements. No hope. The Ver Admiral looked at the tiny human vessel and laughed. He didn't know that the ship wasn't running from them. It was leading them somewhere. Human vessel, the Admiral demanded. Why haven't you surrendered? The answer came. The galaxy had forgotten what fear felt like. For 3,000 years, the Ver Dominion had made certain of that. Its warships stretched across star systems like metal continents. Its armies numbered in the billions. Its banners hung above conquered worlds, and its rulers spoke of victory as though it were not something to be earned, but something the universe owed them. The Ver had defeated civilizations that could move planets. They had broken species that could live inside stars. They had turned entire moons into military fortresses. And then they discovered humanity. A species so young that the Dominion's historians initially believed Earth was a mistake on their maps. Humans had no ancient empire. No vast network of colonies. No legendary superweapon. No fleet worthy of being called a fleet. They had ships. They had soldiers. They had courage. But courage, the Ver believed, was simply another word for ignorance when spoken by a primitive species. So when the Dominion finally reached Earth, humanity had already lost. At least, that was what everyone believed. The Battle of Seoul had lasted 11 hours. 11 hours against an invasion force that outnumbered Earth's remaining defenders by nearly 20-1. The human fleets had fought until their ammunition ran dry. They had fought until their engines overheated. They had fought until there were more burning ships around Earth than there were stars visible through the atmosphere. And when the last orbital defense platform fell silent, the Ver commanders transmitted a simple message. Surrender. Earth did not answer. Instead, something strange happened. One human ship left the battlefield. Only one. It was old, small, scarred. Its hull was covered with patches where entire sections had been repaired by hand. The Ver flagship identified it as the human cruiser Resolute, a vessel nearly 80 years old. Its original design was obsolete by more than half a century. Its weapons were weak. Its shields were damaged. Its engines were operating at barely 40% efficiency. To the Ver, it was not a warship. It was debris that had forgotten to stop moving. Admiral Cale Ver watched the vessel on the command screen. Around him stood officers dressed in silver armor, their long insect-like faces expressionless. The bridge was enormous. The ceiling disappeared into darkness. Thousands of displays surrounded the central command platform. Behind Admiral Cale stood the Dominion's greatest symbol of power, the black and gold throne of the Ver military. He looked at the tiny human vessel. Then he laughed. That's it. No officer answered. Cale leaned forward. Earth had hundreds of ships. Yes, Admiral. And this is what remains. The officer checked his display. Confirmed. Cale smiled. How disappointing. He pressed a control. A communication channel opened. Human vessel, he said. You are surrounded. Static. Then a voice.
Calm.
Female. Confirmed. Cale frowned. Identify your commanding officer. A pause. Captain Mara Vance. Cale almost laughed again. Captain Vance, your world has surrendered. No. The Admiral's eyes narrowed. Your defenses have been destroyed. Yes. Your fleet has been destroyed. Most of it. Your capital is under our control. Not yet. Cale stared at the screen. For the first time, something about the human voice bothered him. Not fear. Not anger. Not desperation.
Calm.
Absolute calm. Captain, he said slowly, you have one ship. I know. You have no support. I know. You cannot defeat the Dominion. Another pause. Then the human captain said something that would later become one of the most repeated sentences in galactic history. We're not trying to defeat you. Cale's expression changed. Then what are you doing? The answer came quietly. Buying time. Cale frowned. For what? Mara Vance did not answer. Instead, the Resolute turned. Its damaged engines flared. The ship accelerated toward the Dominion fleet. Kale stared. The bridge erupted into laughter. Thousands of air officers watched the tiny human cruiser charge directly toward a formation of nearly 400 warships. "She's suicidal," someone said. Kale raised a hand.
No.
He smiled. "She's human." The distinction seemed amusing to him. He gave the order. "Destroy it." 400 ships prepared to fire. And then something impossible happened. The human ship disappeared. Not exploded. Not destroyed. Disappeared. Kale stood motionless. "What?" The tactical officer checked his sensors. "Admiral, I can't find it." "Search." "We are." "Then search harder." The Dominion fleet scanned the surrounding space. Nothing. No engine signature. No weapons discharge. No debris. Nothing. The Resolute was simply gone. Kale stared at the empty region of space. And somewhere beyond the reach of his sensors, Captain Mara Vance watched the Dominion fleet through her own cracked display. She looked exhausted. Her crew looked worse. There were only 32 people aboard. 32 humans. The last operational military crew Earth had left. A young officer looked at Mara. "Captain." She turned. "Yes. We're in position." Mara nodded. "How long?" 6 minutes. She looked toward the main display.
Good.
The officer hesitated. "Captain, are we really going to do this?" Mara looked at him. Then she looked at the image of Earth. Blue. Beautiful. Wounded. Still alive. "Yes." The officer swallowed. "And if it fails?" Mara smiled faintly. "Then we make sure they remember us." Outside the ship, the stars began to move. Not forward. Sideways. The Resolute was entering the one place the Dominion believed no human ship could survive. The Ver fleet's rear corridor. And there, hidden in the darkness, were 12 human ships. Not warships. Not anymore. They were transports. Medical vessels. Cargo ships. Civilian carriers. Each one filled with people. Children. Families.
Scientists.
Engineers. The last survivors of Earth. Mara had not abandoned the planet. She had been protecting its future. The Dominion thought it had captured Earth. But while its fleet celebrated victory above the surface, humanity's last ship had slipped behind them. And it was carrying something far more dangerous than weapons. It was carrying hope. The Ver did not know it yet. But the war had not ended. It had only changed direction. And the first mistake the Dominion made was believing humanity needed an army to fight. Because sometimes all a species needs is one ship that refuses to surrender. The Ver Dominion celebrated too early. Across the occupied skies of Earth, their ships formed perfect formations above the wounded planet. Thousands of silver banners appeared on communication screens. The Dominion had conquered another world. Another civilization had fallen. And the Ver believed humanity would soon become nothing more than a footnote in their history. Admiral Kale Ver stood at the center of the command deck aboard the flagship Eternal Judgment. Behind him, officers moved from station to station. Earth was displayed on the enormous tactical screen.
Blue.
Broken.
Silent.
Kale watched it for a long moment. "Begin planetary occupation." A commander bowed. "Yes, Admiral." Transport ships descended toward Earth's surface. Troops prepared to land. Factories were already being marked for seizure. Human communication networks were being shut down one by one. Everything was proceeding exactly as the Dominion had planned. Except for one thing. The Resolute was still missing. Kale had not forgotten it. Any sign of the human ship? The tactical officer shook his head. "Nothing." "Then stop looking." "Admiral?" Kale turned. "One old cruiser cannot threaten this fleet."
He paused.
"Let it run." That order would later be remembered as the moment the Dominion lost control of the war. Because the Resolute had not run. It had gone hunting. 3 hours after disappearing from the battlefield, the human cruiser emerged beside a Dominion communications relay nearly 6 light minutes from Earth. The station never saw it coming. The Resolute fired once. A single missile. The relay vanished. Then the human ship disappeared again. 30 minutes later, another relay died. Then another. Then another. No explosions large enough to attract attention. No dramatic battles. Just silence. A communication network that had taken the Dominion centuries to build began collapsing piece by piece. The Ver commanders were confused. They were looking for an enemy fleet. But there was no fleet. There was only one ship. One ship that appeared where it should not have been. One ship that vanished before the Dominion could respond. And slowly, something inside the Ver military began to change.
Fear.
Not panic.
Not yet.
But uncertainty. The kind that appeared when the enemy stopped behaving according to the rules. On Earth, the occupation had begun. Ver soldiers marched through human cities. They expected resistance. Instead, they found civilians. Quiet.
Exhausted.
Watching. The Ver commander leading the occupation of New Jakarta stepped from his armored transport. Hundreds of humans stood behind barricades. The commander raised his weapon. Move. No one moved. He pointed at an elderly human man. Did you not understand? The old man looked at him. I understood. Then move. The man shook his head.
No.
The Ver soldier stepped closer. Do you know who we are? The old man smiled. Yes. Then you understand what happens when you resist. The old man looked toward the sky. You should ask yourselves what happens when you think we've stopped resisting. The Ver commander stared at him. Then the sky flashed. Every Ver soldier looked upward. A communications satellite had exploded. Then another. Then another. The Dominion command network went dark. For exactly 9 seconds. 9 seconds was all Mara Vance needed. The Resolute appeared above the horizon. Its engine screamed. It flew between buildings at impossible speed. The Ver commander barely had time to look up. The ship released dozens of small drones. They spread across the city. Not weapons. Holographic projectors. Suddenly, every public screen in New Jakarta came alive. A human face appeared. Captain Mara Vance. She looked tired. There was dried blood beside her left eye. But her voice was steady. To everyone still on Earth.
People stopped moving.
The Ver soldiers stared at the screens. Mara continued. They want you to believe the war is over. A pause. It isn't. The crowd remained silent. Do not attack the occupation forces. The Ver commander smiled. Then Mara said, Not yet. His smile disappeared. Protect your families. Protect your neighbors. Protect the children. Stay alive. She looked directly into the camera. Because survival is not surrender. Then the transmission ended. The screens went dark. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then the old man smiled. The Ver commander suddenly realized something terrifying. The humans were not waiting to be rescued. They were waiting for instructions. And that meant the Dominion had not conquered Earth. It had occupied it. There was a difference. A very important difference. The next morning, the Dominion discovered that every major human industrial system had been sabotaged. Factories refused to activate. Fuel stations stopped functioning. Automated mining systems shut down. Cargo elevators malfunctioned. Navigation satellites provided false coordinates. Even the simplest human machines seemed to develop minds of their own. The Ver believed humans were technologically inferior. But they had made another mistake. They had studied human weapons. They had not studied human creativity. Everywhere the Dominion looked, humans were improvising. A broken communication tower became a signal beacon. A civilian transport became a supply vessel. A hospital generator became a power source for an entire neighborhood. Children carried messages through underground tunnels. Engineers repaired ancient machines using parts from completely unrelated systems. Humanity was not fighting like an army. It was fighting like a species. And the Ver had never encountered anything like it. Still, Admiral Kale remained confident. Increase patrols. The order spread across the fleet. More ships. More soldiers. More checkpoints. More surveillance. The Dominion tightened its grip. And the tighter it squeezed, the more humanity slipped through its fingers. Then, on the 5th day of occupation, something happened that changed everything. A Ver transport ship carrying prisoners disappeared. It had been traveling from Earth's surface to an orbital prison. 37 humans were aboard. The Dominion assumed they had been rescued. But hours later, the prisoners were found.
Alive.
All of them. They were discovered in a medical facility hidden beneath the ruins of an abandoned city. Their soldiers surrounded the building. Their commander entered. He expected weapons. Instead, he found beds.
Dozens of them.
And humans. Some injured. Some barely conscious. And standing between the soldiers and the patients was a young human doctor. She held no weapon. The Ver commander raised his rifle. Step aside. The doctor shook her head.
No.
You are harboring prisoners. They are patients. They are enemies of the Dominion. The doctor looked at the wounded humans. Then back at him. They're bleeding. The commander stared. You expect me to care?
No.
She took a breath. I expect you to decide what kind of creature you are. The Ver soldiers shifted uneasily. The commander raised his weapon, then stopped, because behind the doctor were children. Human children. Some were crying. Some were asleep. One small boy was holding the hand of a wounded Ver soldier. The commander froze. His own soldier. A Ver soldier. Wounded during a street battle. The humans had saved him. The commander looked down at his injured subordinate. Then at the doctor. Why? The doctor frowned. Why what? Why save him? She looked confused. Because he was dying. He is Ver. I know. He killed humans. I know. Then why save him? The doctor answered quietly. Because we don't become monsters just because someone else is willing to. The room fell silent. The commander lowered his rifle. It was the first time a Ver officer had deliberately spared a human medical facility. He would later be executed for it. But before that happened, he sent one message to the Dominion fleet. 3 words. They are different. The message was dismissed. Admiral Kale never even read it, because at that exact moment, alarms began screaming across the Eternal Judgment. A tactical officer ran toward the command platform. Admiral. Kale turned. What? We have a problem. What kind? The officer swallowed. The human ship. Kale's eyes narrowed. What about it? It's not alone. Kale stared at the screen. 1 contact appeared. Then 5. Then 20. Then 50. His officers looked at one another. More contacts appeared.
Hundreds.
Kale stepped closer. What am I looking at? The tactical officer's voice trembled. Ships. Human.
No.
Kale's expression changed. Then whose? The answer came slowly. Unknown. Across the stars, vessels were moving. Not Dominion vessels. Not human vessels. Ships belonging to species the Ver had conquered centuries earlier. Species that had supposedly accepted Dominion rule. Species whose fleets had been dismantled. Species whose weapons had been confiscated. Yet one by one, their ships were emerging from hyperspace. And every single one was following the same signal. A signal coming from the Resolute. Kale stared at the growing fleet.
How?
Nobody answered. Then the bridge speakers activated. Mara Vance's voice filled the command deck. Admiral Kale. He looked toward the communications display. Her face appeared.
Calm.
Almost gentle. You made one mistake. Kale clenched his fists. What mistake? Mara looked at him. You thought humanity was alone. The transmission ended. Behind the Resolute, the stars began filling with ships. Thousands of them. Old ships. Damaged ships. Civilian ships. Rebel ships. Ships from worlds that had spent centuries hiding their anger. And above them all, the smallest ship in the formation. The last ship of humanity. Mara Vance looked at the growing fleet. A young officer approached her. Captain. She turned. The fleet is waiting. Mara nodded. Give them the signal. The officer hesitated. Are you sure? Mara looked at him.
No.
She smiled. But I'm human. Then she gave the order. Tell them to advance. Across the galaxy, thousands of engines ignited. The Dominion fleet watched in horror. For the first time in 3,000 years, the Empire was no longer hunting an enemy. It was surrounded by one. And at the center of that impossible fleet stood a battered human cruiser that had never been powerful enough to win a war. It had simply been stubborn enough to start one. For the first time in 3,000 years, the Ver Dominion faced an enemy it could not understand. There were ships everywhere. Thousands of them. They came from worlds the Dominion had conquered generations ago. Worlds whose people had been stripped of their weapons, their armies, and eventually their hope. But now those same worlds had returned, not under their own banners, not for revenge. They had come because of a human signal. And at the center of the formation was the smallest vessel of them all, the Resolute. Admiral Cale Ver watched the tactical display in silence. His officers were no longer laughing. No one was laughing. How many? Cale asked. The tactical officers stared at the numbers. At least 12,000. A long silence followed. How many Dominion ships? 9,000, Admiral. Cale's mandibles tightened. He had more advanced weapons. Better armor. Better shields. Better training. He still had the advantage. At least, that was what he told himself. Order the fleet into formation. The Dominion ships moved. Thousands of vessels aligned with perfect precision. The rebel fleet was chaotic by comparison. Old freighters, mining vessels, former military cruisers, converted cargo ships, even civilian transports. Cale almost smiled. They brought garbage. His tactical officer looked at him. Some of those ships are carrying civilians. Then they brought civilians to a battlefield. Cale raised his hand. Destroy them. The Dominion fleet fired. Space became light. Thousands of weapons crossed the darkness. The rebel formation broke apart. Some ships were destroyed instantly. Others spun helplessly through space. Cale watched the chaos. Again. The second volley began. Then, the impossible happened. The rebel ships stopped retreating. Instead, they moved forward. Not toward the Dominion warships. Toward the civilian vessels behind them. They formed a wall. A living wall of steel. One ship after another moved between the Dominion guns and the transports. The weapons struck them. Ships exploded. Others lost engines. But they did not move. Cale stared. Why? Nobody answered. The human ship moved too. The Resolute pushed directly into the center of the formation. Mara Vance watched the tactical screen. How many civilian ships? 218. How many damage? 37. Can they escape? Not yet. Mara looked at the screen. Then at her crew. Then we stay. Her first officer looked at her. Captain, if we stay here, we'll be destroyed. Mara nodded. I know. We could retreat. No. Why? Mara looked toward the distant civilian transports. Because they're behind us. The officer understood. He nodded. Understood. The Resolute accelerated. Its shields were already failing. Its weapons were almost empty. Its hull had been repaired so many times that there were entire sections made from metal that had never belonged to the original ship. But it moved forward. The Dominion fired again. The human cruiser took the impact. Warning lights filled the bridge. Shield integrity 20%. Keep going. 15. Keep going. 10. Mara stood at the center of the bridge. Keep going. Captain, we're losing the forward shield. Then use the rear shield. We need it for the engines. Mara looked at him. Not anymore. The engineer understood. Captain, do it. The ship's remaining shield energy shifted. The engine screamed. The Resolute became faster. It flew straight toward the largest Dominion battleship. The Ver commander aboard that ship laughed. She is attacking us? Mara's voice came through the communication channel. Yes. The Ver commander smiled. Then let her. The Dominion battleship opened its forward batteries. Mara waited. 3 seconds.
2, 1, now.
The Resolute suddenly turned. The Dominion fired. The human cruiser slipped beneath the weapons. The entire volley struck the Dominion battleship behind it. The Ver vessel shook violently. Its shields collapsed. Its engines failed. Its own weapon fire had destroyed half its forward defenses. The human ship continued past. The Ver commander stared at the damage. He understood too late. The human had not attacked him. She had used him. Across the battlefield, the same pattern repeated. Human ships moved unpredictably. They did not fight for kills. They fought for openings. They distracted larger ships. They drew fire away from damaged vessels. They guided civilian ships through gaps. And when a ship could no longer escape, other ships came back for it. Always. Again and again. The Dominion commanders began noticing something. The rebels never abandoned their wounded. Not even when it was tactically stupid. Not even when rescue meant risking an entire squadron. A damaged ship would broadcast a distress signal. And someone would answer. Every time. The Ver did not understand. Their military doctrine was simple. A damaged unit was a liability. A weak soldier was replaced. A damaged ship was abandoned. Efficiency mattered more than attachment. The humans seemed to believe the opposite. Their strength came from attachment. From loyalty. From refusing to leave someone behind. Kale watched one human ship sacrifice itself to protect another. Then another. Then another. His expression slowly changed. This is not strategy. His tactical officer looked at him. What is it? Kale whispered the answer. Something worse. On the human cruiser, alarms screamed. The Resolute had lost half its systems. The bridge was filling with smoke. Mara Vance coughed. Status. The engineer looked at his display. We have no shields. Weapons. 1 missile. Engines. 30%. Communications. Short range only. Mara nodded.
Good.
Her first officer stared at her. Good. She smiled. We still have something.
What?
Mara looked around the bridge. Each other. For a moment nobody spoke. Then the crew smiled. The ship continued forward. Suddenly, the main screen flickered. A message appeared. Not from the rebel fleet. From a Dominion ship. The sender was a Ver commander. Human vessel. Mara activated the channel. Go ahead. The Ver officer appeared.
He looked exhausted.
His armor was damaged. Behind him, the bridge was burning. You rescued my crew. Mara paused. Your ship was disabled. You could have destroyed us. We don't need to.
Why?
Mara looked at him. Because you're alive. The Ver officer stared. After everything we've done? Mara's expression hardened. You don't get to decide what kind of person I become. The Ver officer was silent. Then he asked, What do you want? Mara answered immediately. For you to stop. The Ver officer looked away. He whispered something to someone off-screen. Then the channel closed. Seconds later, the Dominion ship powered down its weapons. Then another ship. Then 3 more. Kale saw it happen. Why are they stopping? No one answered. A Dominion officer finally spoke. They are surrendering. Kale turned. To whom? The officer looked at the tactical screen. To the humans. Kale's face darkened. Destroy them. The order was transmitted. But several commanders did not obey. For the first time, Dominion officers were questioning an order from the admiral. Kale realized what was happening. The humans were not defeating the Dominion fleet with weapons. They were defeating it with something far more dangerous. They were making its soldiers think. Then the central display changed. A new transmission. This one came from Earth. Mara opened it. The image showed the surface of the planet. Cities were burning. But behind the smoke were millions of people. Humans. Standing together.
Children.
Families. Soldiers.
Doctors.
Engineers. Farmers. Workers. Everyone. A young girl stood in front of the camera. She couldn't have been more than 8 years old. Mara looked at her. What's your name? The girl answered. Emily. Emily, are you scared? The girl nodded. Yes. Mara smiled gently. So am I. Emily looked surprised. You're scared? Of course. Then why aren't you running? Mara looked at the camera. Because being brave doesn't mean you're not afraid.
The little girl thought about that.
Then she asked, Are you coming home? Mara's eyes became wet. She looked away for a moment. Then back at the screen. Yes. Emily smiled. Promise. Mara swallowed. I promise. The transmission ended. The bridge became silent. Mara looked at her crew. We're going home. The first officer looked at the fleet. Captain, there's one problem. What? He pointed toward the tactical display. The Dominion had deployed its final weapon. A massive battleship emerged from hyperspace. It was larger than anything humanity had ever seen. The ship was called the Eternal Judgment. Admiral Cale Vere stood upon its bridge. Behind him were the Dominion's remaining warships. His voice echoed across every channel. Humanity. Mara listened. You have mistaken mercy for weakness. Cale raised his hand. You have mistaken courage for power. The massive ship began charging its weapons. You have mistaken one successful battle for victory. The energy building around the vessel turned the surrounding stars pale. Mara looked at the screen. Cale continued. You wanted the Dominion to remember you. His voice became cold. Then we shall make certain the galaxy remembers how you died. Mara looked around the bridge. Everyone was exhausted. Some were injured. Some were crying. But nobody moved. Mara turned toward the communications officer. Open every channel. Every channel? Every one. The officer obeyed. Mara's voice went across the battlefield. To every ship still standing. She paused. Look behind you. Thousands of ships turned. Behind them were the civilian transports. Medical ships. Children. Families. Survivors. Everything humanity had left. Mara continued. That's what we're protecting. Then she looked toward the massive Dominion battleship. We're not fighting because we hate them. She took a breath. We're fighting because someone has to stand between them and the people who cannot fight. The rebel fleet began moving. Not away. Forward. Mara smiled. All ships. She looked at the enemy. Protect the convoy. The fleet accelerated. The Eternal Judgment fired. A wave of energy crossed the battlefield. Mara watched it approach. For one terrifying second, the entire galaxy seemed to hold its breath. Then something appeared between the human fleet and the weapon. A Dominion ship. Then another. Then another. Hundreds. Their vessels moved into the path of their own weapon. Cale stared in disbelief. His own fleet had turned against him. One commander opened a channel. Admiral. Cale shouted. What are you doing? The Vere commander answered quietly. Learning. Then his ship joined the others. The human fleet watched in silence. Mara looked at the display. One of her officers whispered. Captain. Mara smiled. Looks like we're not alone anymore. The Dominion's ultimate weapon struck its own fleet. And the galaxy witnessed something it had never seen before. An empire collapsing, not because it had been destroyed, but because its people had finally decided they no longer wanted to be afraid. And at the center of it all stood one battered human ship. The last ship humanity had left. The ship the Vere had mocked. The ship they had called insignificant. The ship they had believed would disappear quietly into history. But history was about to prove them wrong. Because the Resolute was not the last ship of humanity. It was the first ship of something much larger. The Empire mocked humanity's last ship. Then it commanded their fleet. Part 4. The Fleet Bows. The explosion could be seen from worlds away. The Dominion's greatest weapon had fired. And then its own fleet had turned against it. The blast swallowed dozens of Vere ships. Others barely escaped. The Eternal Judgment disappeared behind a wall of fire and shattered metal. For several seconds, there was only silence. Then the battlefield reappeared. Broken. Burning. Changed. Admiral Cale Vere stood motionless on the bridge. Around him, alarms screamed. Half his command stations were dark. His officers were staring at their displays in disbelief. The Dominion fleet had not been defeated. It had simply stopped obeying. Cale looked at the tactical screen. Thousands of ships were still present, but they were no longer under his command. Some had lowered their weapons. Others were moving away. And hundreds had joined the human formation. Cale clenched his fists. Reconnect the command network. No response. Reconnect the command network. An officer shook his head. Admiral, they aren't disconnected. Cale turned. What? They're refusing. The word hung in the air. Refusing. something the Dominion had spent 3,000 years making impossible. Kale looked toward the main display. The Resolute was there. Barely. Its hull was burning. One engine was gone. Its outer armor had been torn away in several places. Yet it was still moving. Still leading. Kale whispered, "Why?" No one answered. He opened a direct channel. Mara Vance. Her face appeared. She looked exhausted. There was blood on her uniform. Behind her, several crew members were treating wounded soldiers. Kale stared at her. "You did this." Mara shook her head.
No.
"You turned my fleet against me."
No.
"You destroyed the Dominion."
No.
Kale's voice rose. "Then what did you do?" Mara looked at him for a long moment. "I reminded them they had a choice." Kale stared at her.
Choice.
The Dominion had erased that word from its military doctrine centuries ago. Orders were obeyed. Fear maintained peace. Loyalty meant obedience. Mercy was weakness. And now one human captain had shattered all of it. Kale looked at the ships around him. Then he noticed something. They were not attacking.
None of them.
The human fleet was simply waiting. Mara spoke again. "Admiral, surrender." Kale laughed. It was a bitter sound. "You expect me to surrender to you?"
No.
"Then to whom?" Mara looked at the surrounding ships. "To everyone." Kale frowned. "You think these people will forgive you?" Mara shook her head. "Forgiveness isn't mine to give." She looked toward the countless worlds represented by the fleet. They deserve the chance to decide what happens next. Kale said nothing. Then a message appeared on his display. "A Ver commander. Admiral." Kale answered. "What?" The commander looked nervous. "The Western Fleet has surrendered." Kale's eyes narrowed. "How many ships?" 700. Another message arrived. "The Northern Fleet has surrendered." Another. "The Planetary Defense Forces have laid down their weapons." Another. "Several governors have declared independence." Kale stared at the messages. His empire was disappearing in real time. Not through destruction. Through refusal. The Dominion was collapsing because its people no longer believed it deserved to exist. Kale looked back at Mara. "You planned this."
No.
"You expected this." "No." "Then how did you know?" Mara smiled faintly. "I didn't." She looked toward the stars. "I just knew people would eventually get tired of being afraid."
Kale sat down.
For the first time in his long military career, he looked old. Not weak. Not defeated. Just tired. "How many humans are left?" Mara's expression changed. She looked at the data. 23 million. Kale froze. "Out of how many?" Mara didn't answer. She didn't need to. He understood. The Dominion had invaded Earth. It had destroyed cities. Killed soldiers. Destroyed ships. And still, 23 million humans remained. Kale whispered. "And you still fight?" Mara answered. "Yes." "Why?" She looked at him. "Because they are ours." Kale frowned. "Your planet. Our people." Then he understood. Humanity had not been fighting for territory. Not for power. Not for revenge. They had been fighting for one another. That was the part the Dominion had never understood. A human could sacrifice everything for someone they had never met. A human could cross a battlefield to save an enemy. A human could forgive. A human could hate. A human could be afraid. But when another human needed help, they came. Always. Kale looked at the surrounding fleet. "Captain." "Yes. If I surrender." Mara waited. "What happens to my people?" Mara answered carefully. "That depends on them." Kale looked toward the Ver fleet. Thousands of soldiers. Millions of civilians. Entire worlds. He knew what the Dominion had done. He knew what he had done. And for the first time, he wondered whether victory was worth becoming the monster his enemies believed he was. Then another message arrived. This one from Earth. A human doctor. The same doctor who had saved the wounded Ver soldier. She appeared on the screen. "Captain Vance." Mara nodded. "Doctor." "We've received another group." "Human." The doctor hesitated.
No.
Mara understood. "Ver." "Yes." "How many?" 42. Mara looked at Kale. Are they injured? Most. Then treat them. Kale stared. You would save them? Mara answered. Yes. Even now. Especially now. Kale looked away. Something inside him broke. Not dramatically. There was no scream. No grand gesture. Just a quiet realization. The Empire had spent centuries teaching its people that compassion was weakness. And here was humanity, standing on the edge of extinction, proving the opposite. Compassion was not what made them weak. It was what made them impossible to conquer. Kale stood. He removed the ceremonial weapon from his belt. Then he placed it on the command console. His officers stared. Admiral? Kale looked at them. I am done. The words spread across the bridge. Then across the fleet. Then across the Dominion. Admiral Kale Vare surrendered. Not because the humans had destroyed him, but because he finally understood them. The moment was transmitted across thousands of worlds. And something strange happened. No humans celebrated. No one cheered. Mara simply closed her eyes. For a moment, she remembered Earth before the war. Rain against windows. Children running through streets. Music. Laughter.
Coffee.
Morning sunlight. Ordinary things. The things humanity had nearly forgotten it was fighting to protect. Her first officer approached. Captain. She opened her eyes. Yes, we won. Mara looked at the battlefield. Did we? He hesitated. What do you mean? Mara looked at the thousands of damaged ships. At the wounded. At the dead. At the worlds that had been enslaved. Then she looked toward Earth. No one wins a war like this. The officer lowered his head. Mara continued. But maybe. She looked at the alien ships now standing beside them. We can win what comes after. The following months changed the galaxy. The Dominion dissolved. Its worlds were no longer ruled by a single emperor. Former prisoners became representatives. Former soldiers became peacekeepers. Human engineers helped rebuild destroyed cities. Human doctors treated Vare civilians. Human ships carried food to worlds that had once been enemies. And something even stranger happened. The former Dominion fleet began following the Resolute. At first, only a few ships. Then hundreds. Then thousands. They followed Mara Vance because she had become something the galaxy had never seen before. Not an empress. Not a conqueror. Not a ruler. A leader people trusted. When the new Galactic Council was formed, Mara refused a seat. Why? They asked. She answered. Because I didn't fight to become your ruler. What do you want? She smiled. To go home. So the Resolute returned to Earth. Its engines were barely functional. Its hull was scarred beyond recognition. It was escorted by thousands of ships.
Human. Vare.
And countless others. When the vessel entered Earth's atmosphere, millions gathered below. The people waited. Then the ship appeared through the clouds. The crowd became silent. The Resolute descended.
Slowly. Carefully.
Like an old soldier coming home. When the landing doors opened, Mara stepped outside. She expected cheering. Instead, she saw a little girl, Emily, the same girl from the transmission. She stood at the front of the crowd. Mara walked toward her. Emily looked up. Captain? Mara knelt. Hello. Emily's eyes filled with tears. You came home. Mara smiled. I promised. The girl hugged her. Mara closed her eyes. And for the first time since the war began,
she cried.
Not because humanity had won. Not because the Empire had fallen. But because there was finally someone left to come home to. Above them, thousands of alien ships waited in orbit. They had come expecting to witness the birth of a new empire. Instead, they watched humanity rebuild.
Piece by piece.
Street by street. Life by life. The galaxy had expected humans to conquer the Dominion. Humans did something far more frightening. They chose not to. And that decision would change everything. Years later, historians would ask the same question. How had one dying species defeated the greatest empire in known space? Some said it was human strategy. Others said it was technology. Some believed it was luck. But the Vare had a different answer. They remembered the old human ship. The damaged hull. the failing engines, the single remaining missile. And they remembered what happened when that ship had every reason to surrender, but didn't, because the truth was simple. Humanity had never been the strongest species in the galaxy. It had never been the oldest, never the richest, never the most advanced. But humanity possessed something the Dominion had forgotten: the ability to stand between danger and someone who could not stand for themselves, the ability to lose everything and still choose compassion, the ability to be afraid and move forward anyway. And that was why the last human ship became the first ship of a new age. Not an age ruled by humans, an age built with them. And somewhere, years later, when children from 100 alien worlds studied the history of the Great War, they would see a picture of the Resolute. One tiny ship, scarred, broken, almost forgotten. And beneath it, one sentence. They thought it was humanity's last ship. They were wrong, because it was the ship that taught the galaxy how humanity survived. Not by being stronger than everyone else, but by refusing to leave anyone behind. And for the first time, the galaxy understood what it truly meant to be human. 20 years after the fall of the Ver Dominion, the galaxy still remembered the Resolute. Children knew its name. Historians studied its battles. Engineers studied its impossible maneuvers. Military academies analyzed Captain Mara Vance's decisions. But Mara herself never liked talking about the war. Whenever someone called her a hero, she corrected them. I was a captain. Whenever someone called the Resolute legendary, she shook her head. It was an old ship. And whenever someone asked how humanity had defeated an empire thousands of times its size, Mara always gave the same answer. We didn't. People would laugh. She never did. We survived. That distinction mattered, because the galaxy had changed. The former Dominion worlds had become independent. The Ver had joined the Galactic Council. Former enemies now traded with one another. Human engineers helped rebuild alien cities. Alien scientists worked alongside human researchers. And the children born after the war grew up knowing something their parents had never imagined. They were not alone. The galaxy was no longer divided between conquerors and conquered. It was learning how to live together. But peace did not erase the scars. Earth still carried them. There were cities that had never been rebuilt. Memorials stood where entire neighborhoods once existed. Millions of names were carved into walls. Every year, on the anniversary of the Battle of Seoul, the planet went silent for 1 minute. No ships flew. No broadcasts played. No music filled the cities. The galaxy remembered. Mara always attended the ceremony. She stood among ordinary people. No guards. No medals. No uniform. Just an old woman with silver hair. She would look at the memorial and remember everyone who had not come home. On the 20th anniversary, something unusual happened. Mara received an invitation. Not from Earth. From the Ver. The message was short. We would like you to return to the place where the war ended. Mara accepted. The journey took 6 days. When she arrived, she found thousands of people waiting. Humans.
Ver.
And dozens of other species. At the center stood a monument. It was shaped like a ship. A small ship. The Resolute. Mara stared at it. A Ver child approached her. He was perhaps 10 years old. His skin was dark blue. His eyes were enormous. He looked nervous. Captain Vance. Mara smiled. Yes. The boy held something in his hands. A small model of the Resolute. I built this. Mara looked at it. It's beautiful. My grandfather served on the Dominion fleet. Mara's expression softened. Did he? The boy nodded. He told me about you. Mara smiled. What did he say? The boy thought for a moment. He said you were the most dangerous human he ever met. Mara laughed.
Was I?
The boy shook his head.
No.
He looked at the model. He said you were the kindest. Mara became silent. The boy continued. He said that's why you were dangerous. Mara looked at him. Your grandfather understood something important.
What?
She knelt beside him. Being kind doesn't mean being weak. The boy smiled. I know. Mara stood. Good. The ceremony began. The lights dimmed. A hologram appeared above the monument. The Resolute floated among the stars. Then another image appeared. Earth. The old Earth. The wounded Earth. The Earth that had refused to surrender. A voice began narrating the history of the war. But halfway through, something unexpected happened. The narration stopped. Mara looked around. The hologram changed. Instead of showing battles, it showed people. A human doctor treating a Ver soldier. A human engineer repairing an alien ship. A Ver commander surrendering his weapons. Children from different species playing together. Families rebuilding homes. Food being distributed. Hospitals opening. Schools reopening. The galaxy was no longer watching a story about war. It was watching what came after. Then the hologram showed the Resolute one final time. The battered ship drifted across the stars. A single sentence appeared beneath it. The galaxy expected humanity to become an empire. The sentence disappeared. Another appeared. Humanity chose to become a bridge. Mara looked down. She was crying. The ceremony ended. The crowd slowly dispersed. But Mara remained beside the monument. An old Ver approached her. Admiral Kale. He had survived. He was no longer an admiral. No longer a ruler. He had spent 20 years helping rebuild the worlds he had once conquered. He stood beside Mara. Neither spoke for several seconds. Finally, Kale said, "I used to hate your species." Mara looked at him. "I know. I thought you were primitive. I know. I thought you were dangerous because you were reckless." Mara smiled. "We can be reckless." Kale laughed softly. "Yes." He looked at the monument. "But I was wrong about why." Mara waited. Kale continued. "You were never dangerous because you wanted power." He looked toward her. "You were dangerous because you cared." Mara said nothing. Kale's voice became quieter. "An empire can control people who fear death." He paused. "But it cannot control people who are willing to die for someone else." Mara looked at the monument.
No.
Kale shook his head. "And it cannot defeat people who believe the person beside them matters as much as they do." Mara smiled. "Now you understand." Kale nodded. "Now I understand." They stood together beneath the stars. Two people who had once been enemies. Now simply survivors. Then Kale asked the question he had carried for 20 years. "Captain." "Yes." "If you had known how many people would die." He paused. "Would you have done it again?" Mara looked toward the sky. She thought about the battle, the burning ships, the screaming alarms, the people she had lost, the children waiting on Earth, the impossible choice. Finally, she answered.
No.
Kale looked surprised. Mara continued. "I would have tried harder to find another way." Kale nodded. "And if there had been no other way?" Mara looked at him. "Then yes." Kale lowered his head.
Why?
Mara's answer was almost a whisper. Because someone had to protect them. Kale closed his eyes. There was nothing else to say. That was the heart of humanity. Not victory. Not war. Not strength. Protection. The instinct to place yourself between danger and someone who needed you. The galaxy had spent centuries measuring civilizations by their weapons. Humans taught it a different measurement. How far would you go for someone else? How much would you sacrifice? How much suffering could you endure without becoming cruel? And, perhaps most importantly, after everything the universe had done to you, could you still choose to be kind? Humanity had answered yes. Not perfectly, not every time, but enough. Enough to change history. Enough to change an empire. Enough to change the galaxy. Years later, the Resolute itself was placed in a museum. Children from dozens of worlds visited it. They walked beneath its damaged hull. They touched the glass, separating them from its ancient engines. They listened to recordings of the crew. One recording became especially famous. It was Mara's final transmission before the Battle of Seoul. Her voice was tired, but steady. "We're not the strongest," the recording continued. "We're not the largest." A pause. "We're not even sure we're going to survive." Then she smiled. "But there are people behind us." Another pause. "And that's enough." Children listened to those words centuries later. They would ask their teachers, "Was humanity really that brave?" And the teachers would answer,
No.
The children would be confused.
No. No.
They were afraid. Then why did they fight? The teacher would smile. Because courage isn't the absence of fear. What is courage? The teacher would look toward the image of the resolute. Courage is being afraid and doing what must be done anyway. That lesson became part of the galaxy's education. Not because humanity demanded it. Humanity never did. It became part of history because every species recognized something familiar inside it.
Fear, love, loss, hope.
The desire to protect someone. The desire to come home. The desire to believe that tomorrow can still be better than today. Humanity had not invented those emotions. It had simply refused to surrender them. And perhaps that was why the galaxy eventually stopped asking why humans were so difficult to defeat. The answer was simple. They weren't fighting to prove they were superior. They were fighting because they believed everyone deserved a chance to live. The Resolute had been the last ship of a dying world, but it had become something more. A symbol, a warning, a promise, a reminder that even the smallest light could guide an entire galaxy through darkness. And on the final day of her life, Mara Vance returned to Earth. She was 93 years old. Her body was weak. Her hands trembled. She walked slowly toward the place where the Resolute had once landed. The same place where Emily had waited for her. Emily was now an adult. She stood beside Mara. They watched the sunset. For a while, neither spoke. Then, Emily asked, "Do you ever miss the ship?" Mara smiled. "Every day." "Why?" Mara looked toward the horizon. "Because it carried everyone I loved." Emily took her hand. "Do you regret leaving it behind?" Mara thought for a moment.
No.
"Why?" Mara looked at the sky. "Because ships are made of metal." She smiled. "People are what matter." The sun disappeared. The first stars appeared. Mara looked upward. Somewhere beyond those stars were worlds that had once feared humanity. Worlds that now called humans friends. She took one final breath and whispered, "We made it." Emily squeezed her hand. "Yes." Mara smiled. Then she closed her eyes. The woman who had commanded the smallest ship in the galaxy was gone. But her story remained. Not as the story of a conqueror, not as the story of an empress, but as the story of a human being who had looked at impossible odds and chosen to protect someone else. The galaxy never forgot. The Dominion fell. The war ended. The fleets went home. The weapons became museums. The enemies became neighbors. And the last human ship became a monument to something far more powerful than war. Hope. Because humanity had taught the galaxy a lesson no empire had ever been able to teach. Strength is not measured by how many worlds you can conquer. It is measured by how many people you are willing to protect. Power is not the ability to make others kneel. It is the ability to stand when everyone else has fallen. And courage is not the absence of fear. It is choosing to move forward while carrying that fear with you. That was humanity. Imperfect, afraid, stubborn, compassionate, sometimes reckless, sometimes broken, but always capable of reaching into the darkness and becoming a light for someone else. The galaxy once laughed when it saw humanity's last ship. It called the Resolute weak, old, obsolete, insignificant. Then that ship crossed the battlefield, and behind it came thousands more. Not because humanity demanded obedience, but because humanity earned trust. The Empire had believed it was conquering a species. Instead, it had awakened an idea that no fleet could destroy, no weapon could silence, no empire could conquer, the idea that no one should be left behind. And so, generations after the war, when young aliens looked up at the stars and saw the human flag beside their own, they remembered the little ship that had changed everything. They remembered the last ship, and they understood why it had never truly been the last. Because humanity was never defined by how many ships it had. It was defined by the people inside them. People who were willing to stand together. People who were willing to sacrifice. People who were willing to forgive. People who were willing to hope. And for the first time, the galaxy understood. what it truly meant to be human. If this story moved you, subscribe for more human stories from the stars.